Hello, my name is Siobhan McDermott and I'm the author of Paper Dragons: The Fight for the Hidden Realm, a new middle grade fantasy adventure series. Paper Dragons follows Deeking, a 12-year-old girl, as she's invited to a magical underwater school where children train to become immortal. However, once she's there, Deeking very quickly realises that staying in the school isn't as easy as she thought, and instead she'll have to take part in monthly challenges or risk being sent home. Meanwhile, back on land, a dangerous grey-eyed spirit is creeping ever closer, and the children who do fail are beginning to disappear. Now, the absolutely gorgeous cover art is done by Vivian Toe. She's done such a brilliant job, and you'll see even on the back there's some jellyfish floating about, and these are so important to Paper Dragons. Today, I'm going to read to you from chapter 1, the very start of Deeking's adventure. Deeking scowled up at the glass dragon blocking her way. Since when does the lead glassmith lock his office door? Why is he making it so difficult to break in? The glass door had been designed to look like a coiling dragon, and its body curled from ceiling to floor in a protective circle, its head snarling out at her from the centre. Deeking flicked its snout in frustration, and a hollow chime echoed across the glassmith's workshop. The dragon's long whiskers jangled together, and she flung her arms round them to muffle the sound. Curled glass pressed uncomfortably against her sleeve, but Deeking couldn't risk moving until the noise stopped. The last thing she needed was a curious glassmith catching her just before she had a chance to find the letter. The pre-dawn haze was doing little to help, filtering down the corridor like a spotlight on her break-in attempt. She groaned and ran a hand along the dragon's overlapping scales. Any one of them could be the switch needed to unlock the door. Phaeto, the village Deeking had grown up in, was set to announce its new silhouette at noon, but she couldn't wait until then. Not when she knew Eragon would be watching, ready to pounce if her name wasn't called. Visions of the lead glassmith's sneering daughter flashed across Deeking's mind, and she shuddered. No, she wouldn't give Eragon the satisfaction. If she found out now that she hadn't been chosen, she could at least hide her disappointment later. Deeking frowned and shut her eyes, head pressed against the glass in concentration. The dragon's carved face was ice cold beneath her forehead, and she grimaced. Training as a silhouette was her only chance to escape Phaeto. If someone else was picked, the lead glassmith would force her to spend the rest of her life trapped inside glass much colder than this. Now that Apol was gone, no one would stop him from sending her into the post pipe, her chances of drowning creeping up with each minute she spent squeezed inside that narrow, water-filled space. Deeking straightened up and winced as she opened her eyes. A large smudge had appeared on the dragon's polished glass, marking the exact spot where her forehead had rested on its surface. So much for a stealth break-in. The lead glassmith might not care about her, but he would definitely notice if there was anything different about his precious door. Deeking tugged her sleeve over her palm, ready to wipe the smudge away, and froze. If pressing my forehead against the glass left a mark, maybe. Deeking took a deep, steadying breath and exhaled gently over the dragon's glass face. Her eyes darted between the soft, pale clouds that bloomed across the surface. There! Faint fingerprints had appeared on one of the dragon's spiraling whiskers, revealing how the lead glassmith entered his office each morning. And you thought you could keep me out, she beamed, pulling the whisker down. The dragon jolted to life, and scales chimed against one another as it uncoiled around the doorframe. The faint clicks of whirling glass clogs rippled along the length of the dragon, and its long body stretched tight against the corridor wall. Deeking slipped inside. There was a faint rumble behind her, and the dragon curled back into its protective circle, plunging the office into an eerie gloom. Centuries earlier, another lead glassmith had stumbled across a shed dragon skin and draped it around the ceiling beams. Over time, the scales had dried and faded to a milky opal until you could almost mistake them for fused shards of glass. but no glass would make a glassmith's hair blaze with crackling white light. Only dragon scales would do that. For Ziking, though, there wasn't even a hint of static along her braid. She puffed out her cheeks and tried to squash down the all too familiar pang of frustration. Why was she the only person in Feitou whose hair didn't glow near dragons or dragon scales? The muffled sound of footsteps bustling past the door jolted her back to her mission. Ziking hurried across the sand-covered floor, wincing in pain when her foot hit against the lead glassmith's desk. Letters fluttered to the ground, and she scrambled after them, peering closely at each one before tossing it aside. Every faint sound on the other side of the door added to the nerves already bubbling in her stomach. She yelped in excitement when she finally spotted an ornate envelope flecked with gold. Heart pounding, Ziking pulled a glass hairpin out from the top of her braid. Her shoulders hunched in concentration while she eased the slim edge under the seal, tensed for the sound of wax snapping in half. Time slowed as the glass pushed forward, and there was a faint pop when the seal came loose in a single piece. Ziking hugged the hairpin tight between her hands before slipping it back into her braid. It might not have been what Appa intended when she gifted it, but Ziking couldn't help feeling her old guardian would have been proud. Despite the darkness, the letter seemed to glow, a narrow triangle of white shimmering up from the opened envelope. She wiped her hand against her loose green trousers, suddenly worried her fingers would mark the spotless paper. Whoever was picked as Silhouette would spend the next year training in Hawkwall, the Sayabahan's hidden realm, learning the skills needed to become immortal. If she passed her Silhouette year, not even the lead glassmith could force her back to Feitou and into the postpipe. Ziking's eyes skimmed across the handwriting, both dreading and desperate to reach the chosen name. The letter fell from her hands. Behind her, the glass door chimed again and the room filled with a soft, pearly white. The lead glassmith stepped inside, followed closely by a second man. But Ziking barely noticed them. Her eyes were glued to the letter that now lay on the ground. In the newly lit room, the name on the paper was impossible to miss. Nothing existed apart from that name. The person chosen as Silhouette, promised a chance at immortality, blazed up from the white paper. Eragon. I hope you enjoyed the first chapter of Paper Dragons, and before I finish up, I just want to say a huge shout out to all the librarians watching this. You guys do such an incredible job. There's no way I would be the reader or even the writer I am today without supportive librarians growing up. Every single book you recommend is just magical. You might not always see the impact it has on the kids straight away, but I can promise you they remember everything you share.